Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones.
My name is Stacey Leibowitz.
Fellow Commission member Jeff French. And we've got a couple students from Greater Lawrence Technical School.
We are joined today,
Director of Compliance and Integrity at Triangle, Paralyzed Veterans of America. Members of our emergency preparedness folks, class in Lawrence.
Okay, that's okay. Yes.
my math is a little bit like 2.5.
Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones, and I am chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance. Today, we have a special treat. One of our own commission members, Stacey Leibowitz, is here to talk about transition planning. It feels odd to say welcome.
But it's good.
Yeah. We're also joined behind the scenes Jeff French and Linda Byers, fellow commission members. We have crew from Greater Lawrence Technical School. Carly Jones is also an intern here at North Andover CAM, but we also have Jezebel Abreu, Cassie Bonanno, Nicole Goyas, Nellie Martinez, Julian Cullen, and we can't get rid of him, we love him, an alumni from Greater Lawrence Technical School, Joshua Robles. And we also have a student joining us from Abbott Lawrence Academy, Pamela Goyas. And we have Susan Martin and Jake Bowman, both of North Andover CAM. So, again, welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
Welcome
on the other side.
Exactly. We're talking today about transition planning. Yes. Okay, let's first explain, why are you here to talk about transition planning? I mean, is this really,
valid question.
Is this really something you know about? What's your background about it?
So I have over 15 years experience working in the field of disability services.
Okay.
Much of that time is spent, or has been spent, on disability transition for individuals from high school. Mostly my side is the adult side, okay, from 22 on. But over the past few years, I have worked with the younger population as well. And I also, from personal experience, I have a younger sister who's 2 years
Yep.
younger than me, who has a developmental disability, and I'm her legal guardian. So this has been a lifelong journey for me as well. So I know the history and the importance of what transition means for families and for the individual themselves moving into adulthood.
Yeah, and you can have empathy because
absolutely,
I've
lived it. My sister's lived it.
So you understand what it's like for the family members who are working with it, dealing with it, going through it, whatever terminology you want to use.
Exactly.
So, what does transition mean? It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. In this context, what does transition mean?
Well, it can mean a few things even in this context.
Okay.
So transition, really it starts if you're dealing with individuals who are in special education in school. The transition age, the transition piece is from 14 to 22.
Okay.
So it's a pretty wide span, and it's students who are on IEPs, as we've, and they are getting special assistance, support from the high school or from the junior high as they move into adulthood. Okay. So it's a long-range plan. The parents, obviously, or guardians, are very much involved in the process to help look at the vision that the student themselves may have. For moving forward into adulthood and graduating high school and then moving into adult programming. The other piece to transition, to me there are two other pieces. There's the turning 18, because there are things that happen even outside of school, like becoming of legal age, things like that, and then turning 22 and aging out of the school system. So there are a number of things that parents, guardians, and the student themselves need to plan for.
So do the students actually start participating in the, because I have a son in IEP, he's never in the room.
Okay.
He's also only 11.
Right.
So if transition planning starts at 14, should or is it recommended that the student who is 14 start participating in whatever is going on their behalf?
It's highly recommended that the student participate. It's really expected, because this is about this student, about this individual and their future and the plans that they have in mind for themselves. What do they want to do? So, obviously the parent and guardian needs to be part of that discussion and support it. But I personally feel very strongly on top of it because of my own experiences, but as a professional, it's really critical for that individual to be part of the discussion, because otherwise you're sitting there making decisions on behalf of somebody else that may not be in line with what they see for themselves. So there's also kind of a vision statement or vision component to these IEPs. IEPs are after 22. But for the IEP, the individual has a vision for themselves, and it's important for the teachers, for the parents, guardians to be part of helping the student to put that together. And then it ultimately becomes part of the meeting. And so that way everybody is talking through what the next steps are as far as courses, as far as, what are their ideas for careers, employment, for college. Because even if somebody has a disability, these days there are colleges that have courses that are in line to support people who have various disabilities. So really anything is on the table, but the individual, the student in question, should be part of that process, absolutely.
And one of the things we've highlighted as a commission and on our show is nothing is ever impossible.
Right. Nothing is impossible, and there is a statement out there, it's nothing about us without us. So, whatever your age is, and again, for me, I'm very passionate about it because, this is, part of this is self-advocacy, because these individuals are going to become adults. And the reality too is that parents, guardians, they're not going to be around forever, or maybe a guardian, if it's somebody else who's assigned to that, may be there, but it's still important that we're encouraging and training and teaching these students, individuals, to be self-sufficient as much as possible and to self-advocate for what they want.
Now, you broke it down into 3 areas. You said starting at 14.
Right.
You said at 18 there's one level, and then at 22 there's another level. Could you kind of break that down?
So we talked a little bit about 14 getting into that range, but when a student turns 18, they're considered to be an adult in the eyes of the law at the age of majority. And regardless about what the parents may think of their child's capacity to make decisions, until a guardianship is put into place legally, that individual can make choices for themselves, whether they're really capable or not. They legally can. Parents can't sign for them unless that child has given, or adult child has given permission, and they may not understand the concepts. But it's important for parents to be aware of this, or whoever is the caregiver for this student child. It's important that they be aware well before they turn 18, because there's a process. And so if guardianship is something that may be part of this process for them, they need to entertain that and start looking at it at least a year before they turn 18, because it's quite a process.
And people need to go through court.
They need to prepare, you have to go through court, you have to petition the court.
You have to get all sorts of medical certificates.
Exactly, there's background checks, and really there's there's reporting. You need to have a psychiatrist involved, or a psychologist, a nurse, or doctor, a social worker, filling out these reports, which will be good for about 6 months. Then you get a court date, and there's an appearance, and there's a whole thing. It's not taken lightly, and it shouldn't be taken lightly.
No, it shouldn't.
And there are different levels of guardianship. So in my case, I'll just say I have limited guardianship in medical capacity for my sister, which is fine. I would never want to have total guardianship over her, because she's more than capable of making certain decisions. So that's an aspect of it that parents have to keep in mind too. What sort of guardianship are you looking at? And Massachusetts is very conservative about that, where they want the least amount of guardianship level to be awarded to anybody, because it's important for the individual, again, to have decision-making skills for themselves, self-choice, and advocacy. So it really depends, but it's a process that needs to start early. If that's a financial component to it, depending on the level of guardianship that's involved, you really want to make sure that you're putting funds away for that, or looking at legal aid. And there are resources out there, but it can run anywhere between about $3,000 to $5,000, because it depends on the level of guardianship. Another layer to it is if you have an individual under certain medications, there's something known as a Rogers Guardian, which also I am a Rogers monitor for my sister because of medication. So if your adult child is on medication that is considered to be like an antipsychotic or something very significant, that might play a role in it. It adds to the money. So those are things parents really need to start thinking about before their child turns 18. It may not apply. They may not need to look at guardianship, or maybe there's some other, like a healthcare proxy or something like that. But that's a pivotal point at 18. The other piece is Social Security, because if your child is receiving some form of Social Security benefit, when they turn 18, again, they're considered to be a legal adult. And that benefit's going to end most likely in the situation it's in, because now they have to apply as an adult.
Okay.
So then there's a trip to the Social Security office, and you want to start planning that before they turn 18.
So are we talking SSDI?
It could be SSDI or SSI, so, and not to get too deep into the woods with that, because that's a different show.
Right, but so
Social Security disability or Social Security insurance, it probably would be SSI.
Okay.
That would be what they're applying for. It also comes with Mass Health. But usually when they're under 18, they're usually under their parents with Social Security, and their parents' income is usually taken into consideration. In this instance, because they are over 18, regardless of guardianship status, that it will only be their own income that's taken. So if they're working or something like that, but they have to reapply as an adult.
As an adult.
So those are things parents need to think about very seriously. To me, that is a pivotal part of the transition process. I don't know if that's really, provided for as far as information through the school systems or some other medium, but it's important to be aware that that will be coming up. The other piece is when they turn 22. So if they age out of the school system at 22, and sometimes they can age out earlier.
Yep.
But you want to plan for that in advance, because what are the next steps when your soon-to-be adult child is out of the school system? Generally, they go through 22, and on their birthday, on the exact date of their birthday, they're done. They don't go to the end of the year or anything like that. So what are the next steps? And when they are in the school system, it's considered an entitlement. It's considered part and parcel of the state benefits that they are receiving to support their child. But once they turn 22, there's no guarantee of what they're going to get for services. It's incumbent upon the parents or guardians to start that process. And so there's an adult system they go into. And what that looks like, I would say at 21, start looking at that. Start applying for these services. So some of the resources or state resources that are out there, one of the bigger ones is the Department of Developmental Services, otherwise known as DDS. There's also the Mass Rehab Commission. There's the Department of Mental Health. You need to apply to the appropriate resource. In most cases, it will be DDS. Go through the application process. They will do assessments, to make sure that this individual actually qualifies for services, because the standards may be different than what has been done in the high school.
Now, let me ask you, as somebody who's worked for the government at many different levels, you don't know, somebody who's worked in the fields understands which one is the right one to go to. I'm a parent. I know nothing except for the fact that my child needs to know that my child is being supported. How do I know if the schools aren't telling me, because they might not know themselves?
Right.
How do I know? Who do I go to? Is there like a central number at each one of these locations where I can pick it up and say, okay, my kid has fill in the blanks. This is what I'm looking for.
Right.
Will they say, well, it's not our agency, it's this agency you need to go to?
So that's a good question. It's really, it can be very confusing. Sometimes it's more straightforward as to what the diagnosis is with a particular individual, but sometimes parents do need to apply to several agencies and go through that process to see where services are going to come from, because sometimes you have individuals with dual diagnoses. They have a developmental disability and a mental illness. Maybe the IQ is a little high. Maybe they're on the autism spectrum, but there are some concerns there about their functional capacity, that they're very high functioning. There are a number of things that go into play when you're applying for services. There is a central point that you would contact. Generally, the high school should be, and I can't speak for each region,
Right.
but they should be doing that transition planning with the family to help gear them towards the right area as far as where to apply and help them with that process. But sometimes that doesn't happen. I've heard those stories as well. But there are different area offices to DDS. So depending on your geographic region, it kind of makes it easy. You're not just applying in Boston, though they do have their own office.
Right, but there's the Northeast and
exactly,
Central.
because they serve different regions. And so, for example, I'll use the Merrimack Valley.
Yep.
We have our own office here in the Merrimack Valley in Lawrence, and
Yep.
that serves the geographic areas, including North Andover, Lawrence, and so forth.
Yep.
Lowell has their own office. There's one out of Beverly that serves the North Shore. So just to give you examples, it depends on where you're geographically located. So that kind of takes a little bit of the thought process out of it that you should go to the one that serves your region.
Right.
But parents may not know that. That's information they need to have. And then it triggers a process where many of the locations now have a transition coordinator through DDS who will help with the paperwork, who will help get the process going.
And that's
So
free of charge.
it is free of charge. Nobody's going to charge you to do that. There
Yeah.
should be no, no concerns with that.
But people do get concerned about
Yes.
things like that.
Yes.
And so it's good to know that if they're going straight to the state is not going to charge them
No.
to utilize these services.
There's no charge to apply for services. It's work. Sometimes parents may, or guardians may choose to hire an advocate or a lawyer to help them with that process. That's their choice.
Yep.
It's a cost. But also they can go about the process themselves and connect. And sometimes if it's not straightforward that this is a DDS situation, it may be MRC if you have somebody who's a little higher functioning. MRC is the Mass Rehab Commission.
Okay.
So, it really depends on what the need is. And what happens is it triggers a process of evaluation, and then if they are accepted, I'll use DDS because that's the funder that I work with through my job. And then there will be a referral generated. Parents are also, and guardians are really encouraged to look at services in the area. So once there's information through DDS, they can refer to different agencies in the area. So I'll just use myself as an example. I work for Triangle Incorporated in Malden. We have several different geographic locations for our day programs, and we also do some transition services through all of our programs. And I'll touch on that momentarily. But basically, if we get a referral from one of our area offices, we set up an appointment with the individual and with their family to do a tour of the location they want to attend. And we also do our own evaluation because we have a very strong clinical team to make sure that we're providing the right services for this individual. And so we connect closely with the parents. We set a start date once we know that everything is all set to go. We know what they want to do, what the individual is looking for in services. So as they age out of the school system, they could potentially attend the day after they age out or the Monday after. That's the ideal, is that you have what is known as it's transition. You want a smooth transition.
Exactly.
So that way they know where they're going. And we offer employment services. We offer community-based services to help train, and this is true for several, most of the agencies, to train up people in, community-based activities so they understand how to use their social skills and how to develop independence and, be able to travel in the community. So that's the ideal, that you're able to transition them. If a day program makes sense, that's great. But if for some individuals, they may be able to go to college. And it depends on the college, but there are programs out there that may be really a good match for somebody depending on their skill set for computer technology or other aspects. So colleges have really evolved to be able to serve this population. So there's a lot of options out there, but parents need to be really good advocates.
Or guardians.
And guardians, that's
Yes.
right. Parents are guardians.
Yep. Not everybody takes care of their kids.
Exactly, good point. And also the individuals themselves, the whole idea, parent, guardian, other family member, the school system, we all should be part of that, training and support to make sure that these individuals are able to self-advocate and state what they want, because that matters.
And that's what we want for any one of our children, regardless of age or ability. We're all at a point where we want to make sure that when they are out on their own 2 feet, they're really out on their own 2 feet.
Exactly.
And this is an important step.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why getting the child involved at 14 would be fantastic, because disability takes all sorts of, and people are on IEPs for all different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
They just might need a little extra help,
Yeah.
In a classroom, or they can be on a completely different end of a
Right.
spectrum, and with a bazillion different steps in between.
Mm-hmm.
And, so some students are just naturally going to be able to graduate from high school and move on to college, and depending upon where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
And some students may never have that opportunity,
Right.
and everywhere in between. So I can, as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
I can understand how really important and integral it is to get that accomplished.
Right.
So no, that's fantastic to know that at 14,
Mm-hmm.
my son should be more involved.
And I want to add to that 14 doesn't have to be the key age. Just
Right.
in general, I think it's really important, because historically I don't think that this is, as we've evolved through the cycle of really providing support for individuals who have cognitive and or physical disabilities, that we're setting that mindset from day one. Once you know that, your child, or if you're a guardian for a child, whatever that looks like, that this child has some kind of a disability, that you don't treat them differently.
Yes.
I think that's the key thing, because I know for myself growing up, that was the situation with my sister, though gratefully my mother saw that and didn't treat her differently.
And it was a different time and
It was a different time, but it's still an issue and concern, because there's automatically that we want to protect. We
Yes.
want to, so from a young age, set the same expectations. They need to learn life skills. They need to learn to make their bed if possible. Like, whatever makes sense in terms of working with your child, set the expectations for yourself and for them really early, that they're going to get an education. They're going to go to work if at all possible. They're going to develop life skills and social skills. And so making sure that those systems are in place as you move along is going to make it so much better for them to self-advocate in an IEP, and then after 22 in an ISP or whatever situation that they're in.
And we're seeing stories all the time where, you're finding out somebody with Down syndrome has been working at the same McDonald's for 25
Yep.
years. Or I think it was last year, only because I'm so into loving government, wasn't it last year we learned about a woman on Capitol Hill with Down syndrome who was the first registered lobbyist?
Yeah, lobbyist, yep.
I mean, these are, and this is one of the points of the commission that you and I work on, is that nothing is necessarily impossible.
Right.
We can always figure out a way to make it happen if it's at all possible.
Right. I mean, I've seen there was somebody with Down syndrome who became a model, who was doing the runway. I think, and
we've got Ms. Wheelchair Massachusetts.
Exactly.
Or the Rolettes, for anybody who doesn't know, synchronized dancing.
Right.
In a wheelchair.
It's changing our mindset. It's changing how we look at somebody with a disability, either physical, cognitive, or both. And to me, creating normalcy, and also not saying, oh, isn't that great? Isn't that special how this person is doing? It's a real inspiration, because honestly, people are tired. They're tired of hearing that. You just want it to be where the whole focus is really inclusiveness, and not having it be such a, oh, isn't that incredible? It's about creating natural supports in the community. So it's really, really critical that, through this process of transition, we're setting that mindset moving forward.
So let's move on a little bit. Graduation, certificates of completion.
Yes.
Okay. Graduation, traditional high school graduate, can go to college if they choose to,
Right.
matriculate, do the whole thing.
Exactly.
Certificates of completion, what's that?
Well, it doesn't meet the state requirements, but they have completed high school.
Okay.
So there are some things they may not have been able to do, maybe the MCAS or something like that. There may be some testing, other items that they were not able to complete, but they were overall able to complete their coursework, and they have a certificate. So it may not allow them to go to college, but there also may be some schools where they can take, courses that don't have credits to them to help with skill sets. There may be other, well, there are other options for them. So, this is where programs like mine would come into play as well. And regardless of whether you have a high school, an official graduation from high school or just the certificate, you would still be able to come to our programming as well. And that's another way where maybe we can help somebody actually get a full diploma from high school. We can sit and work with them on that. Maybe they get a GED. Which would then allow them. So maybe they need more of a focus that they didn't have before. Or we can help them with getting directly into employment opportunities. Maybe that is a better match for them, or maybe a trade school. So really it shouldn't be any different than anybody else. It's just a more focused plan to help them.
Now, I love thinking outside the box. This is part of that.
Right.
And so, okay, I'm a guardian or a parent. I have a child, we won't say my son specifically, but I have a child who doesn't get a high school diploma. So therefore they can't matriculate in college. They don't earn a GED, so they can't matriculate.
They have a certificate.
They have a certificate of completion. What about auditing classes?
Yes. There's no, and I think that's what I was trying to allude to. It may not have come out right, but like non-credit courses, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And how many people do that anyway to develop their knowledge base? So that wouldn't be any different for somebody who has a disability, and we would support that, absolutely.
And for anybody who's questioning, well, what does matriculation mean? It just means the person doesn't come out with a degree.
Right.
Sort of like the person doesn't come out with a high school diploma.
Exactly. So that's always a possibility. Again, the aim, and I speak from my own experience, and I would say this is true for most organizations out there, is that the whole point is to try to support this individual to lead as independent a life as possible, which includes ultimately gaining employment, having a really good residential situation, whether they continue to live with family or in more of an independent setting. The whole aim is to be able to be out in the community doing whatever they want to do, and just in an inclusive situation. So we're, I think the push really, especially through the state, is employment all the way around.
Yes.
Including through, state agencies and the organizations that fund us, that, the whole aim is to get people to be in that situation. So even if they don't, end up taking courses that they're auditing, we can still get them through training. I'll just use my own place as an example that we recently, in one of our programs, because we do transition programming, we have somebody who has been able to get her certification in child care, and to be able to be an assistant at a child care facility, because there's a lot of training that goes into that, a lot of certification that has to happen.
Corey background checks.
Exactly, and now she's working for part-time for two different child care places. So, it's a success story. So there are ways to be creative about this. There's ways to support people. And it's a real success for her. She's thrilled, she's enjoying the work. But it took a lot of one-to-one support. It took, more discipline that maybe it would have taken with somebody else.
But she was willing to work with it.
But she was willing to work on it, and she had her moments, because it gets frustrating. That's where
the
support comes in.
And we all have that.
So there is no reason not to set those expectations through the process. So
now, you're talking about, and I'm looking at some of these notes here that you provided me, because you're the Usually I'm the one who's coming up with the talking points, so this one was an easier one for me. What's the difference between entitlement services and adult eligibility services?
Right, so I touched on that earlier. Entitlement is when they're in high school,
okay,
because that's something that will be provided once they get into an IEP process. They're not going through a separate application process. It is entitlement through age 22 that they're going to be able to get these services.
And for those who don't realize, that's a state constitutional.
Yeah.
It's not even statutory that can be easily repealed.
It's a state law. There are also federal guidelines around schools providing, and I don't know all the lingo, but there's it's called ID.
Okay.
It's IDEA 2004 is
Okay.
when the federal laws, and there are laws that go back to the 70s about
Right.
providing support through the high schools in various states and on the federal level. IDEA 2004 is a disability education law that
Okay.
definitely, there's a breakdown on it about how the high schools are supposed to provide assistance, this whole transition planning. And then there are state laws that also apply that build on that law. I can't remember the numbers, but it's easy enough to look that up. So
And
it
everything's
definitely-
available on the
yes,
internet.
Yes. So
Everything's available on the internet.
exactly. So that's the entitlement. But then when they age out, that's when, there's an eligibility piece, as I was discussing, that the parents, guardians need to plan ahead. They need to, at least by the time that their child is 21, start to apply through DDS,
Yep.
through MRC, through, the Department of Mental Health, if that makes sense. You have to start that process. It's incumbent on you as the parent and guardian to do that. There's nothing guaranteed because, and it's been described as falling off a cliff. So when a child ages out of, or a student ages out of the school system at 22, if a parent or guardian hasn't done something to apply for services, then they have no place to go.
And they have no place
So
to go.
that's the difference between the entitlement and eligibility. So they have to go through, and then the state decides if they are eligible for services, and then they go forward from there.
Now, government is broken up, town, state,
Mhm.
federal. There are certain services at each level.
Right.
Can you go to just the state and they'll farm you out to where you're supposed to go? Or do you have to know, let's take out, there's a special ed director, assuming at every school department, and you can go to that person and they'll help you through the town services. If I go to the state for certain things, are they going to tell me, okay, for this you need to go to the federal government and this is the office you need to go to? Or will they be referred, for example, to Triangle or to other organizations like yourself, and then you tell them, okay, this is what you need to do for this is what you need to do with that, because
Right.
navigating government can be rather daunting to
Right,
people.
and again, I had touched on that just a little bit earlier, that it's through the state. Like and you're talking about the individual aging out, right?
Well, that
Specifically?
and, okay, people know Social Security office, typically.
Right.
Okay, but they may not know, how do I get there? What do I do there? What exactly, they
Right.
need some guidance.
Right.
And if the student or child is referred out to an agency such as yours, you provide that guidance?
We definitely can provide that guidance.
Okay.
So, and talking about even the transition piece, because with Triangle, I think our programming is a little bit more unique compared to maybe some others, but we do some transition programming for some individuals in high school. All 4 of our programs have transition piece as well as a turning 22, they come in after.
Right.
So regardless of the services are very consistent throughout. So the benefit is we work with students who are about 16 and up, where they come to our programming for part of the day. And then we can start working with them, with the school, and with the parents. So we can talk about Social Security. We can refer them to the appropriate sources because they'll be heading towards 18 soon, and then eventually towards 22. So it's kind of a nice seamless process if we're able to do that.
If
it
you
makes
catch it at the
we
beginning.
catch it at the beginning, and we're also able to train the individuals up. We can get individuals 16, 17 into part-time jobs.
What about in the military, if somebody wanted to go into the military?
We can discuss that. We haven't had that happen as of yet, but I'm sure that is something that we can definitely address, and that's a bigger discussion with parents, with the individual themselves. Not to say they couldn't, but I think that's a very different and larger discussion to have.
And I'm not saying you would
Yeah.
know off the top of your
Yeah.
head, but
But we try to support our whole aim again, and I'm sure this is true, and I'm speaking not just for my agency, but I'm speaking
Right.
as a
And-
relative and somebody who's an advocate in the field, that we want to support people's dreams. And if somebody is interested in the military, we want to support that. And it may look a little different. Maybe they're not, going to the front line somewhere, or actually,
there might
doing
be processing paperwork
Right.
behind the scenes, which
Right.
as
Office work.
Yep, which I can tell you, when I was in college, I co-opted, and I worked for, as a civilian, the Coast Guard.
Right.
And I processed paperwork with other enlisted, you know, folks who actually were serving in the Coast Guard. And that behind the scenes work
is huge.
is huge. It's probably just as important, if not slightly more important than, you know, and that sounds horrible because, you know, if you're on the front lines with a gun, that means something.
Right.
But they can't do what they do unless somebody behind the scenes is doing what they're doing.
Exactly. And that's true. Again, I always try to connect it to just anybody else. I mean, somebody wants to go into the military, you know, they may not have a cognitive disability, but maybe there's some other physical component they discover, but maybe they can do something else. If you have somebody with really strong computer skills, and we have a lot of people in our programming that have a lot of computer skills, maybe that's an area. So, you know, we try to help them to tailor the dream and make it, you know, that it's workable. Yeah, that it's realistic. It's like somebody, you know, one of my colleagues had said, well, somebody who wants to be an astronaut, that may not be realistic for them or really for many of us, you know, because of the expectations, but maybe there's something they can do where they're working in a lab or they're working in some area that helps to support that.
But they're still with NASA.
Something that's connected to NASA or NASA-based. So there's always a way to work on it and help to achieve, and that's the whole point. And if you're getting in more on the transition age when they're younger, the younger you're getting in on that to support them, the better the outcome is going to be. Because if we're waiting till later on, there are concerns about them about anybody being able to get a job. So the earlier, the better.
Stacey, I'd really like to thank you for stepping outside your comfort zone instead of being here.
It's not outside my comfort zone. I could talk about this for days, so thank you.
But, you know, I've gone to a lot of programs recently where the biggest thing is, you know, parents are concerned or questioning transition planning. So I'd really like to thank you for taking the time and coming on board and, you know, just taking your experience and your knowledge so that it becomes a little less daunting for people. And please join us next month when Stacey's back as a co-host, where we're going to be joined by Kate Burham of Greater Lawrence Technical School, and she's going to be talking about educational opportunities, which you touched on a little bit earlier. Remember, you can find us on Facebook at North Andover Commission Disability Issues, NAND. I think we got that one wrong this time, but we'll put it up on the closing credits properly.
Right, exactly.
You can also find us on YouTube with North Andover CAM's YouTube. And for those people who, everybody's into podcasts as well.
Podcasts are fantastic.
Yeah. You can also find us on Podbean at NA Ability Assistance, and that Podbean app is free. Thank you again to our crew. We've got Carly Jones, Joshua Robles, Jeff French, Susan Martin, Jezebel Abreu, Cassie Bonanno, Nicole Goyas, Nellie Martinez, Julian Colin, Pamela Goyas, Linda Burns, and Jake Bowman. We have had a huge crew be brought on board, and we're thrilled to have them on board. And until next time on Ability Assistance, have a great one.